My sister's wedding planner called me at 9 in the morning sharp. I was sitting in my beat-up pickup truck on a ridge overlooking the valley, nursing a thermos of black coffee. "We need $85,000 more for the venue," she said. No hello. No preamble. Just a demand. I took a slow sip of coffee. "Tell the owner to call me directly," I said. She laughed, a high, brittle sound. "Honey, you can't afford this place. You're lucky we're even letting you attend." I smiled, looking out over the endless rows of grapevines that stretched to the horizon. My grapevines. "Okay," I said, and hung up. 20 minutes later, my phone rang again. "Before we see who makes the next call, drop a comment. What is the most ridiculous, overpriced expense you've ever seen at a wedding?" I'm reading through them now. It was Richard, my estate manager. "Ms. Zara," he said, his voice tight. "I just fielded a call from a woman named Macy. She claims she's representing the bride for next weekend's event. She was incredibly rude to the staff and demanded we waive the security deposit because, and I quote, the bride's sister is poor and ruining the budget." I leaned back against the worn leather seat of my truck. That was the narrative my family had been spinning for years. They saw the dirt under my fingernails, the sun-bleached clothes, the way I disappeared for months during harvest season, and assumed I was a failure. They didn't know about vines and valor. They didn't know that the girl who used to scrub their floors now owned the largest luxury vineyard conglomerate in the hemisphere. They saw a farmhand. The world saw a ghost. "Richard," I said, keeping my voice even. "Did she specify what the extra $85,000 was for?" "She called it a mandatory sommelier service fee for accessing the reserve vintage," he replied. I almost laughed. Access to the reserve vintage was complimentary for all weddings at the Obsidian Vineyards. It was my policy. I wanted people to taste the best we had to offer. Macy wasn't just rude, she was a thief. She was padding the bill and planning to pocket the difference, banking on my family's ignorance and my supposed poverty to cover her tracks. "Let it play out," I told him. "Do not correct her. Do not reveal my identity. Just tell her the owner will handle it personally upon arrival." I hung up and looked at my hands. They were stained purple from the morning's testing. It wasn't dirt. It was the lifeblood of this valley. I remembered being 16, working these same fields as a picker while my sister Aliyah got manicures for prom. My parents, Patricia and Gregory, had told me then that labor was all I was good for. "Some people are born to wear silk, Zara," my mother had said, "and some are born to wash it." They were right in a way. I washed the silk, then I bought the factory that made it. But I never told them. Why? Because silence is a filter. When you appear empty of status, devoid of power, you become a mirror. People show you exactly who they are because they don't think you can do anything about it. My family showed me their greed, their judgment, their conditional love. If I had flashed my wealth, they would have loved the money, not me. By staying the poor sister, I ensured that every interaction, every sneer, every exclusion was authentic. It was the only honest thing we had. I started the truck. The engine roared to life, a rough, mechanical sound that comforted me. I drove down the winding dirt road toward the main estate, dust billowing behind me. I wasn't going there to save the wedding. I wasn't going there to beg for a seat at the table. I was going to inspect my property. And if a few pests needed to be removed from the vines, well, that was just part of the job. I pulled up to the service entrance of the Obsidian Vineyards an hour later. Place was buzzing. Tent crews were setting up on the south lawn. Florists were hauling in crates of white hydrangeas, and somewhere near the main lodge, I could hear Macy shouting orders. I parked my truck next to a row of gleaming luxury SUVs. My parents' rental, Aliyah's convertible, Macy's pristine sedan. My dusty Ford looked like a bruise on a perfect apple. I got out, smoothing my flannel shirt. I walked toward the tasting room, keeping my head down. I heard them before I saw them. My mother's voice carried on the wind, sharp and performative. "Oh, we're just so thrilled," she was saying. "Aliyah has always had such exquisite taste. We knew only the Obsidian would do." I rounded the corner and saw them. My parents were holding court with a group of early arrivals, wealthy friends of the groom, Wesley. Wesley was a good man, a tech guy who had made his own money and stayed humble. I liked him. I wasn't sure how he survived my family. Then I saw it. The Whisper campaign. As I approached, my father, Gregory, spotted me. His smile faltered, then tightened into a grimace. He leaned in toward a woman dripping in diamonds and lowered his voice. but the wind carried it straight to me. That's our eldest, Zara. We try to help her, of course, but she lacks ambition. She works with her hands. It's a shame, really. The woman made a sympathetic noise, glancing at me with pity. At least she showed up, my mother added, her voice dripping with martyred patience. We were afraid she wouldn't be able to get the time off from whatever it is she does. I didn't stop walking. I didn't flinch. I just kept moving toward them. Alaya was there, looking perfect and perfectly indifferent, checking her reflection in her phone screen. She didn't defend me. She never did. To her, I was just background noise, a glitch in her aesthetic. Macy intercepted me before I could reach the group. She stepped into my path, a clipboard clutched to her chest like a shield. Service entrance is around back, she snapped, not even looking at my face. Then she paused, recognition dawning. Oh, it's you. She looked me up and down, sneering at my boots. The sister. Hello, Macy, I said. I believe we spoke on the phone. I don't have time for pleasantries, she hissed. And I certainly don't have time to find a place for you. You're not on the seating chart. I'm the bride's sister, I said calmly. I assume I'm sitting with the family. Macy laughed. With that attire? Absolutely not. You'll ruin the visual symmetry. I've set up a vendor table near the kitchen. You can sit there. Try not to get in the way of the servers. I looked over her shoulder at my parents. They were watching. They heard. They did nothing. My mother actually turned away, pretending to admire a flower arrangement. That was the moment. That was the price of admission. I realized then that I wasn't paying a psychological toll to be part of this family anymore. I was paying an entrance fee to see the truth. This was the final exhibit in the museum of their indifference. Fine, I said. The vendor table is fine. Macy looked disappointed that I didn't fight back. She wanted a scene. She wanted to throw me out. Good, she said. And keep quiet. We have important guests arriving for the rehearsal dinner. Don't embarrass your sister more than you already have. I walked past her toward the kitchen. I knew the kitchen staff. I knew the chef Marco. I knew the servers. They were my people. As I entered the back of the house, the atmosphere changed instantly. Tension dissolved into efficiency. Marco looked up from a simmering pot of reduction, his eyes widening. He started to wipe his hands on his apron, preparing to greet me properly, to call me boss. I held up a finger to my lips. He paused, confused, then nodded slowly. He understood. I wasn't the owner tonight. I was the poor sister. I grabbed an apple from a crate and leaned against the stainless steel counter, watching the monitors that showed the dining room feed. Marco, I said softly, is the reserve vintage prepped for the tasting? Yes, ma'am, he whispered. The Ghost Block, 2018. It's breathing now. Good, I said. Let's see if they can taste the difference between a label and a legacy. The rehearsal dinner began an hour later. I sat at the small folding table near the swinging kitchen doors alone. The room was bathed in golden light, the chandeliers glowing, the conversation a low hum of expensive pleasantries. My family sat at the head table, laughing, drinking, basking in the reflected glory of a venue they didn't own and a bill they hadn't paid. Macy stood up, tapping a spoon against a glass. Attention everyone, she announced. We have a very special treat. A mandatory addition to our evening, but one I think you'll find exquisite. She gestured to the servers, who began pouring deep red wine into the crystal glasses. This is the Ghost Block Cabernet. Extremely rare. Sourced from the most exclusive vines in the valley. She held up her glass, swirling it theatrically. You'll notice notes of vanilla and perhaps a hint of cherry. It's a very sweet, accessible wine. I watched from my corner. Vanilla, cherry, sweet. The Ghost Block 2018 was a high-altitude Cabernet, grown in volcanic soil. It was known for its aggressive tannins, notes of graphite, tobacco, and dark currant. It was anything but sweet. It was a fighter's wine. And, Macy continued, her eyes scanning the room until they landed on me, since we have the bride's sister here, perhaps she'd like to give us her opinion. I'm sure she drinks wine. The insult was clear. She was inviting me to humiliate myself. She expected me to say it was nice or good, and prove my lack of sophistication. The room went quiet. My father looked at his plate. Alaya looked annoyed. Wesley looked concerned, about to stand up. I stood up first. I picked up my glass and walked slowly toward the center of the room. The boots I wore made a heavy, solid sound on the hardwood floor. I didn't look at my family. I looked at Macy. "It's not vanilla," I said, my voice clear. I swirled the wine, watching the legs coat the glass. "And it's certainly not cherry." Macy scoffed. "Oh, and what would you know about it? Stick to your beer, honey." I brought the glass to my nose. "It's graphite," I said. "Volcanic ash. Blackcurrant. And there's a distinct note of stress in the finish." Macy blinked. "Stress? Hydric stress," I corrected. "The vines for this vintage were deprived of water for 6 weeks before harvest. It forces the roots to go deep, to break through the bedrock to find moisture. It concentrates the flavor. It makes the grapes fight to survive." I took a sip, letting it coat my palate. "That's why it's not sweet, Macy. It's resilient. It tastes like survival." The silence in the room was absolute. I set the glass down on the head table, right in front of my father. "But you wouldn't know that," I said to Macy. "Because you read the tasting notes for the Merlot on the back of the menu. This is the Cabernet." Macy's face turned a violent shade of crimson. My father was staring at the glass as if it were a grenade. Elia really looked at me for the first time all day. "You read the label," Macy sputtered. You memorized some words." "I didn't read the label," I said. "I wrote it." Before the shock could fully register, the double doors at the far end of the room swung open. Richard walked in, dressed in his full estate manager suit, looking impeccable and severe. He walked past the guests, past my parents, past a stunned Macy. He stopped in front of me. He bowed. A slight, respectful inclination of his head. "Ma'am," he said, his voice carrying to every corner of the room. "Shall we open the reserve vault for the main course? Or would you prefer to stick with the house selection?" "The vault, Richard," I said. "I think we're done with the house wine." The room didn't just go silent. The air left it. It was a vacuum. You could hear the hum of the refrigerators in the kitchen. My mother's fork clattered onto her plate. My father stood up, his chair scraping loudly against the floor. "Ma'am," Macy whispered. "He called you, ma'am." "He called me the owner," I said. "Because I am." I turned to face the room. "My name is Zara. I own the Obsidian Vineyards. I own Vines and Valor. And this," I gestured to the wine, to the walls, to the land outside, "is my home." The realization hit them in waves. I saw the math happening in my father's eyes, the years of poverty, the beat-up truck, the dirty hands. He realized in that second that he hadn't been looking at failure. He'd been looking at the work that built an empire. I wasn't finished. Ownership was just the opening move. I pulled out my phone and tapped the screen. The big projector behind the head table, normally for wedding slideshows, lit up. "Now," I said to Macy, "let's talk about that $85,000. Her invoice to my parents filled the screen. Exclusive sommelier package. $85,000. "This," I said, "is fraud." I swiped again. My company's internal pricing sheet appeared. Sommelier services, complimentary for wedding packages. "These services are free," I said, voice steady. "Macy has been charging you anyway." She inflated florals by 40%. Lighting by 60%. She's stolen nearly $150,000 from this family in 3 months. Macy went sheet white. It's a service fee. Standard. It's theft," I cut in. "And I don't allow thieves in my house." I looked her dead on. "You're fired. And you're banned, not just from here but from every venue in the Vines and Valor network. 12 vineyards in Napa. 4 in France. 3 in Italy. You're done, Macy." She didn't argue. She just folded, grabbed her purse and bolted, heels scrambling across a floor she no longer belonged on. I turned to my family. My parents were pale. Elia cried silently. Wesley wore a small, proud smile. "Zara," my mother whispered, "we didn't know." "I know," I said. "You never asked." My father straightened, reaching for his old posture. "Well, this is a surprise, but we always knew you were special. We were hard on you to push you." I laughed once, cold and sharp. "Don't rewrite history because the ending changed. You weren't hard on me to push me. You were ashamed of me." "That's not true." "It is. I heard you in the garden. She lacks ambition. She works with her hands. You apologized for me like I was a stain. We paid for this wedding, he snapped. We have a right to standards. We spent a fortune. You spent nothing. I swiped again. A bank transfer filled the screen. Anonymous Trust, Obsidian Vineyards. Full balance paid. I paid for every flower, every plate, every drop of wine. Those investors you bragged about. That bonus you said came through. That was me. My father sank into his chair, suddenly small. He was a guest at a party he thought he hosted. So here's the deal, I said. The wedding still happens. I won't punish Aliyah for Macy's crimes or your ignorance. But the pretense ends. No more looking down on people. No more apologizing for me. You're guests in my home. You respect my staff. You respect me. Or you leave. They didn't leave. Shame glued them to their seats. They nodded, humbled. The next day's wedding was beautiful, and lighter. No gaudy ice sculptures. No mandatory crystal chargers. Just clean, elegant warmth. The air felt grounded instead of performative. At sunset I stood at the vineyard's edge with a glass of Ghost Block 2018. Tasted like earth and effort. Wesley joined me, clinked his glass to mine. Nice party, he said. It's all right. Your parents seem quiet. They're learning, I said. Steep curve. I always wondered why you drove that truck. Why you never corrected them. It was easier to let them underestimate me than to prove myself to people who didn't want to see it. And now I don't care if they see it. I see it. I watched the vines darken in the evening. Rocky soil makes deep roots. Their rejection had been my rock, forcing me to dig for my own water, build something real. Tomorrow I'd be back in the fields, hands stained again, because that was who I was. The vintner, not the ornament. Aliyah danced with Wesley, happy and unperforming. Maybe there was hope for us. Maybe not. Either way, I didn't need the applause. I left early, gravel crunching under my boots. My truck smelled like dust and diesel home. I drove down the winding road without looking back. The roots were deep. The vintage was good. And I was finally free.